February 7, 2018, coalition forces see a buildup of personnel and equipment over the course of 1 week near a Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, headquarters located in Khasham. The U.S.'s effort on countering ISIL and pro-Syrian forces are well underway as part of Operation Inherent Resolve. Russian mercenary involvement was identified, and Russian officials were repeatedly reminded of the SDF and coalition forces' presence. The Syrian government speaks of a brutal massacre, and Russia accuses the U.S. of being financially motivated in their attacks, referring to the nearby oil fields that got destroyed in the U.S.-led airstrikes. In what is now known as the Battle of Khasham, or the Battle of Conoco Fields, Russian mercenaries with Syrian militias fought an intense 4-hour battle against U.S. Special Forces. It was only a matter of time before these two world powers would eventually clash, as both countries are funding and supporting opposite sides. If we zoom out, we see that pro-Syrian militias are supported by Russian forces, predominantly Wagner Mercenaries, which are allies to Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian president. Without covering all the politically motivated details, Putin has had a lot of advantages by getting access to the strategic positions within the Mediterranean Sea, as well as preventing Syria from joining the Western influence. He presumably had all the reasons for invading Syria because of that. On another note, it is believed that the Wagner and Russian government clash started here, where there. Now, the U.S., on the other hand, is fighting the opposite side of that battle, which seems like it's always seeking to fight against Russia by proxy. The same goes for Russia against the U.S., of course. Since 2014, the U.S. has declared war on the Islamic State and began to counter the efforts on their home turf. In 2017, when the SDF gained the upper hand in Raqqa, the city on the left bank of the Euphrates River, about 100 miles east of Aleppo, the river was deemed as a literal demarcation and deconfliction line between Russian and U.S. forces. Crossing this line, or showing signs of aggression, would be met with direct force. It all went well until February 2018, where it all went south and it resulted in 4-hour battle. The battle. During this war, Russian mercenaries were taking over oil fields and protecting them, getting a share of the revenue as an arrangement between Putin and Assad had stated. And what looked like a somewhat ordinary day at the Conoco natural gas refinery would quickly turn into a battlefield when they received intelligence from an intelligence team roughly 20 miles away. A team of Green Berets and infantry Marines stared at their computer screens, watching drone feeds and seeing troops and material gaining near the gas plant. The Conoco site, where a team of about 40 Delta Force operators and Rangers were stationed at the moment, received this intel and quickly reached out to the higher command. In the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, who stayed in close contact with the Pentagon, these commanders, military officers, and operations analysts watched the scene unfold. They briefed pilots and ground crews, and it quickly became apparent that they were put on high alert. The team of Marines and Green Berets were forming a quick reaction force in case of need. According to the U.S. military, around 10 p.m. local time on the 7th of February, 500 pro-Syrian soldiers from the Syrian army, Shia militants, and Russian mercenaries launched an attack on the SDF headquarters as personnel and T-72 tanks moved towards the Conoco fields. Mortars, artillery, and rockets made up a coordinated attack as the whole area was bombarded. When the attack started, the U.S. Special Forces immediately sensed that these were not the ordinary adversaries, but highly trained and equipped forces. This, of course, did not come as a total surprise. Although the U.S. had no interest in conflict with the Russian-backed Syrian forces, they made sure to keep an eye on them. Knowing what they have and where they go is crucial intelligence and fuel for their own decision-making. U.S. troops had repeatedly warned about the growing mass of troops, something of which the Russian government said they had no control over. Even though radio equipment deployed by American surveillance had picked up ground forces speaking in Russian. This had all the signs of plausible deniability, as the Russians might have thought that the U.S. at the Conoco fields impacted their agreement with President Assad. In the first few moments of the attack, 20 to 30 shells landed within the vicinity of the SDF HQ. The Special Operations Forces on the ground immediately elicited a response to this attack, which led to the coalition aircraft to start their engines. Ready to defend boots on the ground, AC-130 gunships, F-22 Raptors, MQ-9 Reaper drones, and Apache helicopters were sent to the area to make sure that the attackers would regret their decision.
Right next door to us. Right there. He is right there.
Good to note is that the U.S. Department of Defense made sure to stay in constant contact with the official Russian liaison officer, which was posted in a city nearby throughout the whole engagement. They needed assurance to only fire upon the troops on the ground when there were no signs of regular Russian forces. Engaging with Russian forces could have meant a bloody conflict with the two world powers, something that was feared during the start of the civil war in Syria since 2014, as both have taken opposing sides. What followed after was a 4-hour battle with the U.S. and Russian-backed Syrian forces in fierce combat. The Conoco outpost was hit with artillery, shells, tank fire, bullets, and mortars in a mixture of hellfire, aimed at the forces at the Conoco oil refinery in the hopes to wipe away any existing threat. The American commandos searched for cover, then rushed behind dirt walls to fire missiles against tanks and machine guns at the incoming stream of armored vehicles. For the first 15 minutes, U.S. military leaders contacted their Russian colleagues and urged them to halt the assault. When that failed, U.S. forces fired warning rounds at a convoy of trucks and a howitzer. This was not enough to stop the troops from advancing. Several attacks were launched against enemy troops, tanks, and other vehicles during the following 3 hours. From the ground, Marine rocket artillery was launched. During this attack, the Quick Reaction Force assembled and rushed to the battlefield as they neared the Conoco plant. They were forced to stop as the barrage of artillery and airstrikes to silence the enemy's advancing was too dangerous to drive through. As the last hour of this attack is passing, where the U.S. forces on the ground are still taking cover, taking shots of bullets, missiles, and tank shells while burning through their own ammunition. Among the U.S. forces, Air Force combat controllers worked on directing the next fleet of bombers, targeting the adversaries, trying to hit them as hard as possible. This was successful as the ground forces watched the mercenaries and pro-Syrian fighters return and retreat. The small team of American forces remained unharmed, and by wonder, only one Allied Syrian fighter was wounded. At the amount of casualties on the pro-Syrian army and Russian mercenaries, there is still an ongoing discussion. Russian officials initially said that only 4 Russian citizens, but perhaps dozens more, were wounded or killed. A Syrian officer had stated to have around 100 casualties on their side. U.S. obtained documents state that there were at least 200 to 300 casualties. Russia has used their plausible deniability in full force, as this had all the signs of a targeted attack to regain their control on the Conoco oil refinery, but were in no position to take on the U.S. forces. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. See you all in the next video.